1970s weren't just about peace, love, and understanding. While politicians preached order and conformity, rock musicians were writing songs that challenged everything, from corrupt governments to religious hypocrisy to social control. These weren't subtle protest ballads. These were musical middle fingers raised high against the establishment. Today, we're counting down 13 songs from the 70s that told authority exactly where it could go. Number 13. Picture this: a British band watches their government's heavy-handed response to civil unrest, then crafts a reggae-punk fusion that becomes their signature sound while delivering one of the decade's most direct challenges to law enforcement. The Clash, White Man in Hammersmith Palais, 1978. The Clash didn't just sing about revolution, they lived it. This track emerged from Joe Strummer's frustration with both racial tensions and police brutality in late 70s Britain. The song's title references the famous London venue, but the lyrics cut deeper, taking aim at systemic racism and authoritarian overreach. Strummer's vocals snarl with genuine anger as he delivers lines about police harassment and social injustice. The reggae-influenced rhythm wasn't just stylistic, it was political, showing solidarity with Jamaica's oppressed communities while calling out Britain's own problems. What made this song particularly dangerous was its timing. Released during a period of racial tension and economic uncertainty, it gave voice to the frustrations of working-class youth who felt abandoned by their government. The authorities weren't amused. Several radio stations initially refused to play it. Number 12. Here's a band that took their name from a medieval torture device and used it to torture the establishment instead. Their frontman's theatrical antics masked some of the sharpest social commentary of the decade. Alice Cooper, Elected, 1972. Alice Cooper understood something most rock stars didn't. Sometimes the best way to expose political corruption is through dark humor and theatrical excess. Elected was Cooper's satirical take on American politics. Released during the Nixon era when trust in government was crumbling, the song's lyrics read like a campaign speech from hell, with Cooper promising everything and delivering nothing. A perfect mirror of actual political rhetoric. Lines about wild parties and getting elected were delivered with such over-the-top theatricality that they exposed the absurdity of political promises. Cooper's stage performances of the song were legendary. He'd appear in top hat and tails, complete with campaign buttons, turning rock concerts into political theater. The message was clear: if politics is theater, then let's make it honest theater. The establishment's response was predictable: moral outrage, calls for censorship, and attempts to ban Cooper's concerts, which of course only proved his point about authorities' fear of being mocked. Number 11. This next artist started as a folk singer, but transformed into rock's most uncompromising voice against war. His 1970s output included a song so controversial that radio programmers were afraid to touch it. Neil Young, Ohio, 1970.
This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio.
4 dead in Ohio. 4 words that changed everything. When National Guard troops opened fire on student protesters at Kent State University on May 4, 1970, Neil Young responded with one of the most powerful protest songs ever recorded. Young wrote Ohio in a white-hot fury after seeing the photographs of the shooting. Within days, he'd convinced Crosby, Stills, and Nash to record it with him. The result was a raw, emotional indictment of government violence against its own citizens.
How can you run when you know?
The song's power lies in its directness. Young doesn't hide behind metaphors or poetry. He names names and assigns blame. 10 soldiers and Nixon coming leaves no doubt about who's responsible. The guitar work is equally uncompromising, with Young's feedback-drenched solo sounding like the chaos of that tragic day. Radio stations were terrified of the song. Many refused to play it, fearing government retaliation or advertiser boycotts. But the song found its audience anyway, becoming an underground anthem for the anti-war movement and proving that rock music could be a weapon against injustice. Number 10. Think of a band whose very name became synonymous with rebellion, led by a frontman who turned unpredictability into an art form. Their 1973 album contained a track so explosive and confrontational that critics and radio programmers didn't know what to do with it, and many simply refused to play it. The Stooges, Search and Destroy, 1973. Iggy Pop and the Stooges didn't just challenge authority, they declared war on it. Search and Destroy was their battle cry, a song so aggressive and uncompromising that it made other punk bands sound like choir boys. The song's military imagery wasn't accidental. Written during the height of the Vietnam War, it appropriated the language of warfare and turned it against the system that created it. Iggy's vocals are delivered with the intensity of a man under siege, which in many ways he was. The Stooges were constantly harassed by police, banned from venues, and dismissed by critics as dangerous degenerates. Search and Destroy was their response. If you want to treat us like enemies of the state, we'll act like it. The song's influence on punk rock cannot be overstated. Bands like the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, and the Dead Kennedys all cited it as inspiration. It proved that rock music didn't have to be polite or commercial to be powerful. Number 9. Our next entry comes from a band that had already established themselves as rock's most explosive live act. But their 1971 masterpiece contained a track that became the ultimate anthem of skepticism toward political promises and revolutionary change. The Who, Won't Get Fooled Again, 1971. The Who's Won't Get Fooled Again was rock's most cynical take on political revolution. Written by Pete Townsend during a period of massive social upheaval, the song expressed deep skepticism about whether real change was possible, or if new leaders would simply become the same as the old ones. Townsend's lyrics cut through the idealistic rhetoric of the late 60s counterculture movement with surgical precision. The famous line, "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss," became a generational motto for those who'd watched promising political movements collapse into the same corruption they'd promised to eliminate. Roger Daltrey's vocals built from quiet resignation to explosive fury, perfectly capturing the frustration of a generation that had believed change was possible, only to watch it fail. Keith Moon's drumming was apocalyptic, while John Entwistle's bass provided the steady heartbeat of disillusionment. The song's synthesizer work was revolutionary for its time, with Townsend using early electronic instruments to create sounds that seemed to come from the future. This wasn't just a rock song, it was a sonic prediction of political cynicism that would define the coming decades. Politicians hated the song's message of distrust toward authority. Radio programmers were nervous about its length and controversial content. But Won't Get Fooled Again found its audience among those who'd learned that questioning authority wasn't just rebellious. It was necessary for survival in a world where power corrupts absolutely.
It's the same, and history ain't changed.
Number 8. Picture a British rock band that used their platform to challenge everything from religious authority to social conformity. War Pigs, 1970. Black Sabbath didn't just play heavy music, they delivered heavy truths. War Pigs was their devastating critique of the military-industrial complex, comparing politicians and generals to Satan's army. The song's lyrics were uncompromising in their condemnation of those who start wars but never fight them. Lines like, "Politicians hide themselves away," and "Why should they go out to fight? They leave that all to the poor," cut straight to the heart of class-based warfare. Musically, the song was equally revolutionary. Tony Iommi's crushing guitar riffs and Geezer Butler's thunderous bass created a sound that was darker and heavier than anything that had come before. This wasn't just protest music, it was the sound of apocalypse. Religious groups were outraged, claiming the band promoted Satanism. Conservative politicians condemned them as a threat to social order. Radio stations banned their music. The establishment's reaction only proved that Sabbath had struck a nerve. Number 7. Here's an artist who emerged from New York's underground poetry scene and transformed rock music by proving that rebellion could be both intellectual and visceral. Her 1975 debut contained a track that turned a classic love song into a declaration of sexual and artistic independence. Patti Smith, Gloria, 1975. Patti Smith's version of Gloria wasn't just a cover, it was a complete reimagining that turned Van Morrison's innocent love song into a manifesto of sexual liberation and artistic rebellion. Smith's opening declaration, "Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine," immediately established this as something entirely different. Smith didn't just challenge musical conventions, she challenged religious authority, sexual norms, and the entire concept of what a female rock star could be. Her spoken word verses were delivered with the intensity of a prophet, while her vocals soared with an almost religious fervor that made the blasphemy even more powerful. I just get bored till I look out the window. The song's structure was revolutionary. Smith combined poetry with rock music in ways that hadn't been attempted before, creating a template that would influence everyone from Sonic Youth to PJ Harvey. This wasn't just punk music, it was art rock with teeth. Religious groups were scandalized by the opening line, while conservative critics dismissed Smith as a degenerate. Radio programmers didn't know how to categorize her music, but Smith didn't care about fitting into existing categories. She was creating new ones. Gloria proved that rock rebellion didn't have to be mindless or anti-intellectual. Smith showed that you could challenge authority with both your brain and your gut, that poetry and punk could coexist, and that women could be just as dangerous as men when they picked up a microphone.
Walking down the street, here she comes, coming through the door.
Number 6. Think of a band whose very name struck fear into the hearts of parents and politicians alike. Their 1977 single was so controversial that it was banned by the BBC and sparked debates in Parliament. Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, 1977.
God save the Queen. She ain't no human being.
The Sex Pistols didn't just challenge authority, they declared it dead. God Save the Queen was their assault on the British monarchy, released during Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee celebrations. Johnny Rotten's sneer was audible in every line as he declared there was no future in England's dreaming. The song wasn't just anti-monarchist, it was anti-everything the British establishment represented. Class system, tradition, deference to authority. All of it was fair game.
No future for you.
The establishment's response was swift and severe. The BBC banned the song, major record chains refused to sell it, and the band members were physically attacked on the streets. But the controversy only made the song more powerful. The Sex Pistols proved that rock music could still be dangerous, that it could still threaten the established order. In an era when rock was becoming increasingly commercial and safe, they reminded everyone what rebellion actually looked like.
God save the Queen. 'Cause tourists are money.
Number 5. Our next artist was already a folk legend when he shocked the music world by going electric. But his 1970s output included songs that were even more controversial than his famous Newport Folk Festival performance. Bob Dylan, Hurricane, 1975.
I saw him leave it, he says when he stops. One of us had better hurry.
Bob Dylan's Hurricane was more than a protest song. It was an 8.5-minute indictment of the American justice system. The song told the story of boxer Reuben Hurricane Carter, who Dylan believed was wrongfully imprisoned for murder. Dylan didn't just sing about injustice, he named names and pointed fingers. The song accused specific police officers, prosecutors, and witnesses of corruption and racism. This wasn't abstract protest, it was investigative journalism set to music. The establishment's response was predictable.
Number one contender for the middleweight town. Had no idea what kind of shit was about to go down.
Law enforcement officials condemned the song as irresponsible. Legal experts warned Dylan about potential lawsuits. Radio stations were reluctant to play such a long, controversial track. But Dylan didn't back down. He organized the Rolling Thunder Review Tour, partly to raise awareness about Carter's case. The song helped generate enough public pressure to eventually secure Carter's release from prison, proving that rock music could still change lives.
Dexter Bradley laid his rap on the cops. I just came in this place tonight to see what I...
Number 4. Picture a band that combined the power of hard rock with the precision of progressive music. Their 1976 concept album included a track that became an anthem for anyone who'd ever felt crushed by institutional authority. Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, 1979. Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 was their assault on educational authoritarianism. The song's famous chorus, "We don't need no education," became a rallying cry for students worldwide who felt oppressed by rigid school systems. Roger Waters wrote the song based on his own traumatic experiences in British schools, where corporal punishment and psychological abuse were common. The lyrics painted education not as enlightenment, but as indoctrination, designed to create compliant citizens rather than free thinkers. The song's use of a children's choir was particularly subversive. Having actual students sing about rejecting education created a powerful irony that wasn't lost on authorities. Several countries banned the song, and some schools forbade students from singing it. The track became more than a hit, it became a movement. Students around the world adopted it as their anthem, and it played a role in education reform movements across multiple countries. Pink Floyd had proven that even the most sacred institutions weren't beyond criticism. Number 3. By the late 70s, this artist had already written some of rock's sharpest protest songs. But in 1979, his aim turned inward, at the music industry and at rock itself. His album opened with a song that questioned whether rebellion could survive once it became part of the establishment. Neil Young, My, Hey, Hey, Out of the Blue, 1979.
Hey, hey, my.
Neil Young's My, Hey, Hey was his meditation on the death of rock and roll's rebellious spirit. The song's famous line, "It's better to burn out than to fade away," became a generational motto. But the song's real target was the music industry's tendency to sanitize rebellion. Young was watching punk rock emerge and recognizing it as rock's return to its dangerous roots. The song was his acknowledgement that his generation of rock stars had become too comfortable, too safe, too much a part of the establishment they once challenged. The acoustic version that opened Rust Never Sleeps was haunting enough, but the electric version that closed the album was devastating.
Out of the blue and into the black.
Young's guitar feedback sounded like the death rattle of corporate rock, while his vocals delivered the eulogy for rock's lost innocence. The song's influence extended far beyond music. Kurt Cobain quoted it in his suicide note, and it became an anthem for anyone who refused to compromise their principles for commercial success. Young had reminded everyone that true rebellion requires sacrifice.
You can't come back when you're out of the blue.
Number 2. Think of a band that emerged from London's punk scene and wasn't afraid to address the racial tensions tearing apart British society. Their 1977 single was so controversial that it sparked debates about whether white musicians had the right to sing about race riots. The Clash, White Riot, 1977. The Clash's White Riot was born from Joe Strummer's experience at the 1976 Notting Hill Carnival, where he witnessed clashes between black youth and police. But instead of just observing, Strummer wrote a song that challenged white complacency in the face of racial injustice. The song's central message was provocative. White people needed to get as angry about oppression as black people were. Strummer wasn't calling for racial violence, he was calling for white solidarity with black resistance. The lyrics demanded that white youth stop being passive observers and started actively fighting the system. This was dangerous territory for a white punk band. Critics accused The Clash of appropriating black struggle, while others claimed they were inciting racial violence. Radio stations were nervous about playing a song with Riot in the title, especially one that seemed to encourage civil disobedience. But The Clash stood by their message. They understood that true rebellion meant confronting uncomfortable truths about race and class in Britain. The song became an anthem for multiracial unity in the punk movement, proving that rock music could bridge racial divides while challenging authority. The establishment's nervous response, banning the song from some radio stations and condemning it in Parliament, only proved that The Clash had identified a real source of social tension. They weren't just making noise, they were forcing Britain to confront its own contradictions about race and justice. Number 1. Our final entry comes from a band that took their name from a Rolling Stones song, but used their platform to deliver the most uncompromising challenge to authority of the entire decade. Their 1977 single was so controversial that it was banned in multiple countries. Dead Kennedys, California Über Alles, 1979. The Dead Kennedys' California Über Alles was the most uncompromising attack on political authority of the 1970s. Jello Biafra's lyrics painted a dystopian vision of California under fascist rule, with then-Governor Jerry Brown as the dictator. The song's title deliberately evoked Nazi Germany, while the lyrics described a future where hippie idealism had been perverted into totalitarian control. Biafra's vocals were delivered with the intensity of a man witnessing the apocalypse, which in his view, he was. The Dead Kennedys didn't just challenge authority, they declared war on it. Their concerts were regularly shut down by police, their records were banned from stores, and band members were arrested on various charges. The establishment treated them as genuine threats to social order. But that was exactly the point. The Dead Kennedys believed that rock music should be dangerous, that it should make people uncomfortable, that it should challenge every assumption about how society should work. California Über Alles was their manifesto, and it remains one of the most powerful protest songs ever recorded. These 13 songs proved that rock music could still be dangerous in the 1970s. They challenged authority, questioned power, and refused to accept the status quo. The spirit of rebellion these artists embodied still echoes in rock today, reminding us that music has always been a weapon against authority.